We'd like to welcome you today to our ongoing webinar series. This webinar series is brought to you as a collaboration between the Preemie Parent Alliance and the Family Advocacy Network of the National Perinatal Association. This year, we're presenting on a series of guidelines that was created by an interdisciplinary team headed by the National Perinatal Association. And these guidelines became what is now known as NPA's Interdisciplinary Recommendations for the Psychosocial Support of NICU Parents. Today, we're going to talk with a couple of our authors. But first, we want to let you know that if you're interested in reading the guidelines, and we certainly hope that you are, that they are available through the Journal of Perinatology. Fortunately, it's open access, which means that anybody who is interested in accessing the articles may do so. It's a wonderful set of well-outlined recommendations in a very readable format. So we hope that if not today, but soon, you'll take a look at those guidelines and become more familiar with them. The guidelines cover 6 domains or areas that the authors feel are the basic and fundamental components for psychosocial support of NICU parents. Today, as we talk about these, we're going to talk a little bit about the rationale. Why were the recommendations created? How did they decide what was going to be in them? What makes them so important, and how do NICU staff and peer mentors take these recommendations, support them, and find ways of enacting them in their own neonatal intensive care units? We'll also be, during our conversation, talking about various resources that are available to you that we've created to help with the implementation of these guidelines. Today you have 2 hosts, myself, Erica Goyer. I'm with the National Perinatal Association, and I'm joined by my colleague, Kara Sorrells, who is the founder of the Preemie Parent Alliance. Today, our presenters are the co-authors of the recommendations for the psychosocial support of NICU parents, Dr. Sue Hall and Dr. Mike Heinen. We're very pleased to have them with us today and to talk about this project, which was very ambitious, and the 2 of them convened a broad and diverse interdisciplinary team that we'll talk a little bit more about in the coming minutes. First, I want to tell you a little bit about Mike Heinen. Mike Heinen, I know through my work with the National Perinatal Association. He is a retired professor of clinical psychology. Mike is also the father of a son who was born at 30 weeks back in 1980, and his son Chris spent 42 days in the NICU. Mike's area of emphasis that he's been doing most of his research on is about the emotional impact and mental health impacts of a NICU stay, including talking about depression and signs of post-traumatic stress disorder. Mike has been on the board of directors for NPA. He's currently on the editorial board for the Journal of Perinatology. Along with Sue Hall, like we said, he is the co-editor and co-initiator of this project. Mike has been a longtime advocate in furthering the role of psychologists in the NICU. He's convened a group with NPA that seeks to promote mental health support in the NICU by convening NICU psychologists and talking about what we can do to broaden their role and their presence in our NICUs as they become neonatal intensive parenting units. Dr. Sue Hall is a neonatologist from Southern California. Dr. Hall brings her experience as a social worker to her role in medicine, and it has informed how she supports parents along their NICU journey. Throughout her association with the National Perinatal Association, she's been a strong advocate for psychosocial support, and she led the development of the interdisciplinary recommendations along with Mike that were published in the Journal of Perinatology in December of 2015. Subsequently, she has taken what was learned during the creation of those guidelines and has created a fabulous tool for NICU staff. It's an online education course that walks them through how to provide psychosocial support. We'd like you to learn more about that, and those materials and that curriculum can be accessed at www.mynicunetwork.com. So today we're going to cover the section of the publication that's talked about as the introduction, which is Psychosocial Program Standards for NICU Parents. So Sue, I'm going to start with you. Can you tell us a little bit about how this whole project was conceived?
Well, when I joined the NPA, I was looking around for a way I could be useful and involved. And I was thinking about neonatology and all of the guidelines that we have for treating specific disease states in babies. We have guidelines for how to treat PDAs and necrotizing enterocolitis and a whole host of conditions. But there were no guidelines for how to treat and involve parents. So I thought that was a big gap in what neonatology had to offer. And I met Mike, the psychologist, who also had a very strong interest in parent support. And it seemed like we were a perfect match. And so I proposed to him that we work together on this project.
So for those who have not yet had a chance to read the guidelines or are not familiar with them yet, could you take a moment just to give us a brief overview of what the different domains are within the recommendations?
Well, you already showed the graphic that showed the 6 areas that are the topics. And basically, the whole idea is to provide support for parents in all the different domains by taking best recommendations or best practices that were already published in the literature if they were available, and if not, to develop expert consensus on what recommendations should be. So again, the topics are mental health of parents, improving our communication skills so that we can better relate to parents and support them, providing peer support, family-centered developmental care, palliative and bereavement care, and staff education and support. So we wanted to get away from the model where parents turn over their baby to the NICU staff, and the NICU staff calls them when the baby is ready to come get the baby and go home. Whereas the parents we might be sending the baby home to might be stressed out or traumatized by the NICU experience and really not healthy emotionally to be able to support the emotional health and development of their baby. So our goal is to support the family so that they can support the baby for the best possible outcome.
So Sue, I know this was a huge undertaking, and the team that you assembled to do this was amazing. And what was it that you had to look at when you're doing recommendations for NICU support? I mean, the NICU is the home to just a broad spectrum of professionals. So who did you invite to participate?
Well, we wanted buy-in from all of the professionals that practice in the NICU, and not only buy-in, but input. So we involved neonatologists and bedside nurses, nurse practitioners, social workers, occupational therapists, psychologists, and we also wanted buy-in and input from the major organizations representing those professionals. So we had the National Association of Neonatal Nurses, the American Academy of Pediatrics, Nurse Practitioner Organization, Occupational Therapy Organization, National Association of Neonatal Therapists. We had a variety of academic institutions. I think altogether we had about 20 organizations as well as 20 different academic institutions from all over the country. And of primary importance is that we involve parents who were NICU graduates in the creation of guidelines that will affect future NICU parents. So our collaboration with the Preemie Parent Alliance was absolutely essential.
So Mike, could you explain for us what exactly is psychosocial support and why is this so important in the NICU?
Sure. To paraphrase Richard North Patterson, you really don't know fear until you've had children. And I've given talks over the years about the emotions of high-risk parents that I have titled terror, grief, impotence, and anger. So Psychosocial support should exist on many, many different levels, from courtesy to compassion, understanding, and empathy. The psychosocial support in the NICU should also kind of begin with the receptionists and extend through the custodians and all of the staff. Parents, to use the psychologist's term, are facing a potentially traumatic experience when they go into the NICU to see their baby. And they need all of the support that they can get from everyone to begin the process of parenting as soon as they are psychologically able. We know from research studies that the greater the involvement of the parents with the baby, the better the baby's development in the NICU. We also know from research that parents who experience significant levels of depression and anxiety are not only suffering themselves, but their babies are also going to be experiencing delayed development, both within the NICU and afterwards. So what Sue and I have been trying to do is really to facilitate a cultural shift within the NICU. And also I want to say that I'm very happy to have accepted Sue's proposal. I think that we have had a wonderful relationship, and Sue is, as I've said many times in public, the finest research collaborator and writer that I've ever worked with.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You know, one of the things that I really appreciate about the development of these guidelines, and something that the Preemie Parent Alliance has long advocated for, is the inclusion of parents and parent leaders on the front end, that we are a part of the development instead of kind of on the back end where everything's already done by the clinicians and researchers, and then they want to get a rubber stamp of approval from the parents. So that is just what made the Preemie Parent Alliance just really enjoyed being a part of that from the development. So tell me, why is that critical for providers or research teams out there that might not be used to working with parent leaders or parents on the front end? Why is it critical to include us at the beginning of a project like this?
Over years of going to professional meetings, I have repeatedly heard members of the NICU staff say that they really did not understand their job until they listened deeply to parents and to parents' experiences. It was much more than just caring for the baby, but they had to broaden their eyes and their vision and their ears. I think back years ago to a survey of nurses in the NICU that asked the question, what was the biggest problem that you faced? And the most frequent answer of the biggest problem was the parents. Well, we needed to do something to be able to change that perception, and to have the NICU staff recognize that it is not only the baby that it is their patient, but it is the whole family. An inclusion of the family from the beginning became essential. And within our work groups, certainly many of the professionals learned from the experiences of the parents as they shared things in the workshops that we had and all of the telephone discussions. So it was a no-brainer. And the more that the staff could resonate to and understand the perspective of parents, the more sensitive the recommendations became.
And it really does speak to the mission of the National Perinatal Association of being multidisciplinary and that parents are included. So just really happy that that's the path that you took with these guidelines.
So Sue, as Kira was saying, so oftentimes one of the things that's frustrating for parent organizations is that we're not included and we're only brought in at the end. So as you were approaching this project and kind of explaining to other people the role of parents, how did you explain to them why parents were so important to be involved from the beginning?
Well, the trend in healthcare these days is interprofessional collaboration, which means more than interdisciplinary or multidisciplinary. It means involving the parents or the patients who are going to be recipients of the care in the development of the care. So again, we wanted to get away from the idea of taking the babies away from their parents and performing our magic, and we wanted to move towards listening to parents about what their concerns were. We wanted to become familiar with the research about how the NICU stay affects parents and hear from lots of parents who validated this research with their own personal stories. And as Kira mentioned, the personal stories, and Mike mentioned as well, the personal stories have such a great impact on caregivers. And so we just made it a baseline proposition that parents would be involved in developing these guidelines.
And I want to ask Mike, I remember the first time I sat in a meeting that was full of clinicians and researchers, and I was just a couple years out of the NICU and just kind of sat there thinking, I'm just a mom. What in the world do I have to offer with this room full of experts? So what would you say to a NICU parent leader who may be asked to participate in a project or a work group, but really wonders if what they have to offer is anything of value, since they don't have a medical or clinical background? Their background is purely their experience.
I would tell these parents that I certainly understand their timidity and reluctance, but now is their wonderful opportunity to take and turn their terrible experiences into something that is very, very positive and can make a huge difference. The reluctance of parents when they begin to kind of screw up their courage and go forward, and especially having something in their hands like the publication of the psychosocial standards and recommendations, can begin to empower them to be much more than just a token. Sometimes when parents are asked to be on committees or work groups, they just want a smiling parent who will say yes. But the best parents are the ones who become insistent, who have information and knowledge, and especially those who, once they start talking with other parents who have been in somewhat leadership positions, begin to learn that powerful organizations like the Vermont Oxford Network always includes parents in their working committees. They have parents as being leaders of those groups. And indeed, the parents' perspective I would encourage is to develop themselves personally as a NICU parent leader, to actually request, maybe demand sometimes, to take charge of the committee leadership, to always be assertive, ask for the sun and the moon, and don't give up. There are people in PPA that we know that who have gone to hospital administrators and have said, we would like to have a psychologist in the NICU. We need a therapist in the NICU. And they've met resistance. And we know that they have fought through the resistance and continued to persist. And enduring is incredibly important, as all of us know.
Kira, can I add something?
Yes, please.
Well, I want to emphasize that parents are, we call them on our teams, experts by experience. So we have our professional experts, but then we have our experts by experience, and we honor that experience. And another comment that, Kira, I've heard you say before, and other patient groups will say it as well, nothing about us without us. So we don't want to make any decisions for parent care without their input. And the final thing is that I have seen, as I know all of you have, that parent involvement in reconfiguring NICU care can be tremendously healing for parents who did suffer depression or post-traumatic stress. It's a way for them to give back and feel like their experience was meaningful because they're able to help further change.
Exactly. I couldn't agree with that more. And I also just want to reiterate Mike's comment of persistence. And you do have to kind of, build up your courage. I think one of the things that is challenging for parents in the NICU is when you're going through that experience, is that you feel less than a parent because you don't have your baby at home in your nursery. You feel less than a doctor or a nurse who seems, they know so much more about your baby. But we really do have that opportunity through that experience with the right psychosocial support to be empowered and to become those advocates that our children need. And then once we get to that point where we can step out and give back, being persistent. And like you said, building yourself up as a NICU parent leader, which, between NPA and PPA, I think we've together built some of the best NICU parent leaders out there. So it really can be done, and don't give up.
Well, yeah, I was just going to, mention that too, Kira, is that the work that can get done by parents is amazing. And the Preemie Parent Alliance is just really a testament to what can happen when parents are empowered to participate. And that's one of the things that I've always appreciated so much about the National Perinatal Association. I think they've really been on the forefront of pulling together this team and everybody being treated as colleagues and everybody's input being seen as equally valuable and worth considering. I think, again, with NPA and PPA both pushing for more parent involvement, we have seen, even among organizations that were already including parents, we're seeing much more of an appreciation for the leadership capacity that family advocates can have.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So, Sue, again, this is a tremendous undertaking and required a lot of time researching, like you said, to look at what were the best practices, what was published, what was evidence-based, what was maybe a potentially better practice that there wasn't evidence for yet, and what was there that wasn't in the literature that you needed to look maybe towards even creating. So tell us a little bit about the life of this project and how it moved from that to publication, and more importantly, from the publication, how do we now take that and implement it in our communities?
Well, just to review the work of our work group, we spent about a year developing the recommendations. So we broke down into teams, we assembled teams, and the teams worked through conference calls that were held on at least a monthly basis. And then at the conclusion of that first year, we had a summit where we invited everybody who was participating to meet together. And we had an all-day forum where each of the teams worked together to finalize their recommendations as best that it was possible. And then we shared those recommendations with the group. The second year of the project was the writing of the papers that contain the recommendation. So that resulted in 6 papers plus an introduction that were published, as we've mentioned, in the Journal of Perinatology in December 2015. The next step, which was the third year of the project, we focused on giving suggestions about implementation of the guidelines through quality improvement practices. So we presented at the Vermont Oxford Network and a number of other places trying to give suggestions about how to implement these recommendations. We also had another paper, again, about using quality improvement techniques to implement change within a NICU. And then the fourth year of the project, we kept hearing from people, well, these are great recommendations, but oh my gosh, how do we do this? And we need education for our staff. And staff education was actually one of the topics of the work groups. And so we decided to develop an educational course, which took a full year. So as you said, this is a really long-term project. So we launched our course, which is an online course, in January of last year. And to date, we have awarded over 1,000 continuing education credits to nurses, doctors, social workers from a variety of different hospitals. We have just completed a study because we knew that there would be, skepticism in the marketplace, if you want to call it that, about why should we engage our whole NICU staff in this educational course? How do we know it's going to be of value? And so we did a study that, again, took a full year to do, and we have just had the paper describing that study accepted for publication in the journal Advances in Neonatal Care. It should be online within 2 or 3 months. So the study did show the efficacy of our course in improving staff knowledge about the importance of supporting parents and staff confidence in their ability to do just that in all of the domains that the course covers. So again, this has been a 5-year project, and our next phase of the project actually is to move into development of a course for psychosocial support during the obstetric experience, including all throughout pregnancy, during labor and delivery, and postpartum. And that course is actively under development at this time.
It's been, I think, to add to what we were talking about earlier about persistence, there's also a great deal of patience, because nothing that can be done well is going to happen overnight. And to see how the work has just built and built and built and will continue to build and grow, I think is very exciting.
So Sue, I know one of the initial things that came out of, publication was we had the journal articles, but then it was, okay, how do we communicate this information to people who are ready to undertake a project? You've got the recommendations in the journal, and journals are great, but now it's like, now what? What do we do? So tell us a little bit about what came out of those conversations.
Well, Erica, if you will remember, you and I collaborated to create a website called supportfornicuparents.org. So that's support and the number 4, nicuparents.org. And this website has 2 parts to it. One is for professionals and one is for parents. And what we have done is collected all of the resources that we gathered during the creation of the recommendations, and we put them online. So part of, the recommendations say to do this and do that, and the website gives tools for how to do those things. So for example, if we're talking about palliative care, we have example of a palliative care order set. We have an example of a birth plan for a family that is expecting that their baby might not survive. We have guidelines for how to engage families in bereavement rituals. We have lots of mental health resources. So this website is a very active website. I actually get inquiries all the time from people who've been investigating resources on the website. And it's available for anyone, and we invite all of you to take a look at that. But I would have to say the inquiry I get most frequently from that website is about how to start a peer support group for parents.
Oh, that's fantastic. And I know we're going to talk about that. You're, along with our colleague Christy Love, are going to talk a little bit about that in one of our upcoming webinars. But I have to say, this website has been such a fantastic tool for parent advocates, because when you want to go and say, here are the recommendations and here's why it's important, you've got all the, well, that's great, but what do we do next? So you print out the handouts, but behind that is the immense and extensive bibliography of the evidence that was gathered, and it is so wonderful to have that all in one place and to be able to use it in order to advocate for the care that our families need.
Yeah, one of the things that I think is particularly helpful is we have some papers called talking points, and they're talking points about how to convince hospital administration to allow parents to start a parent support group, and also talking points for hiring a psychologist, because hospital administrations are going to be skeptical of any request that they spend more money, even if it's to benefit patients and their families. So those talking points we assembled, and I think they've been very helpful for different groups that have approached their hospital administrations.
And again, I think you've done such a good job of laying out the arguments. And one of the things you've done too is that you've really demonstrated, especially in the area that's there for NICU professionals, about how all these improvements, and especially the hiring of a mental health professionals to support the NICU, improves the lives not just of the parents, but it really improves the well-being of the staff, whether it's their satisfaction with their job, or whether it is navigating what in the past might have been tricky issues. And so it's so fantastic that then that has now led into this work that you've been doing around the courses that you're offering for NICU professionals.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that staff support is a key part of our course, because we are asking NICU professionals to adopt new skills, and we know that in order to do this, they need support for their own emotional reactions to caring for NICU families. There's something called secondary traumatic stress syndrome that can affect professionals, as well as burnout. And so we offer a lot of ideas and suggestions and techniques for how to address these issues as well.
So let me ask a question of both of you. In your opinion, what do you think the next big idea is in neonatal care? Let's start with you, Mike.
Well, I think there are a few big ideas, but since NIPU is up on the slide screen, we will start with that. And the Newborn Intensive Parenting Unit is actually a term that was originated within the Vermont Oxford Network. But Sue and I and other authors from National Perinatal contributed to an article that appeared in Journal of Perinatology that is also on the slide in front of you, introducing people to the concept of the Neonatal Intensive Parenting Unit. And again, this is an attempt to facilitate a cultural change within the NICU. And one of the goals of the parenting unit is that the emotional health and well-being, both of families and of the NICU staff, are of equal importance as the health and well-being of the NICU baby. So we want the NICU to be transformed from a medical unit actually into a home, so that parents are welcomed, they feel like they are at home, and in fact they are slowly being put in charge of taking care of their baby, where parenting becomes the ultimate in the goals that can be developed and obtained. So in some ways, to think about it, currently there are sometimes debates about whether parents ought to be allowed into the unit during rounds or shift changes. That has been evolving into many NICUs now welcome parents to be there during rounds. And ultimately, I think that the ideal would be that parents go from being participants in rounds to actually leading the rounds before discharge, and being encouraged to ask the questions of the staff and to provide direction for how their baby is being cared for, because they are the ones who are going to be caring for their baby as they go forward. I also think that there are better opportunities to integrate parents into more professional organizations. I know that it would be costly and difficult, but I would like to see, oftentimes you go to professional meetings, there are presentations by parents, but it seems as though, the star parents around the country have been chosen and found, and they get their hour or their hour and a half, and everybody feels good about the presentation, but then it ends there. And I would like to see conferences like the Gravens, for example, really involve organizations like PPA in much more of an interactive, ongoing sense, so that the medical community can realize all of the resources that are available from PPA, and there can also be cross-fertilization in all directions.
I would certainly support that idea for sure. I think that's one of the things, one of our goals with PPA is that our parent leaders aren't looked at as just parents who have a traumatic story to tell, but we really do have incredible resources and organizations and leadership capabilities that can really benefit the work that so many provider organizations do. And, our partnership with the National Perinatal Association has been such a beautiful example of how it can work and how it can work well. So I support that big idea for sure. Sue, what about you? What are your thoughts on the next big idea or approaches to neonatal care?
The next big idea that I've seen at conferences I've been to is couplet care. So we have moved into private room NICUs. Not everyone has a private room NICU, but there's a lot of evidence suggesting that babies and families do better and thrive to a greater degree with private room NICUs, and so that's the trend. But the next big thing is couplet care, where both the mother and the baby are cared for in the same room. The baby's in intensive care and the mother is postpartum, but she's in the same room with the baby until she's discharged. This, of course, can't occur if the mother herself requires intensive care, but if she has an uncomplicated postpartum course, then the mother rooms in with the baby. And I think some hospitals have one nurse taking care of both, and some hospitals have actually a postpartum nurse and a NICU nurse taking care of their respective patients. There have been a couple of NICUs, and I can't tell you off the top of my head where they are, that have designed their facilities to do this, but it is happening, and I think it's a really interesting sort of next wave experiment. Of course, the private room NICUs are configured so that the parents can spend 24/7 with their baby, although some of them just have a couch, which I don't think is the greatest solution, instead of a bed for the parents, but they're moving in the right direction.
I was going to comment on that too for a second, Sue.
Yeah.
One of the things we're going to do is we're going to share some of these resources, and you're absolutely correct. I think it was Dr. Cohen up in Salem, we knew especially, who did a presentation that he called The Power of a Bed, and talked about what they were doing in their NICU in order to promote this sort of couplet care. So it'll be interesting to check in with them and to learn more and to learn who else are adopting these practices.
Yes, I agree.
So Mike, let me ask you, how has this movement to single rooms, private rooms in the NICU, how has that affected care?
It has also been consistent with the development of a type of care within the NICU known as family integrated care, where parents are given the primary responsibility for the day-to-day care of their baby, with the exception of a few more technical interventions that nursing or physicians may need to be involved with. But in this advance, moms and dads become much more accustomed to caring for their baby earlier. They're engaged in parenting earlier, and it just gives them a much better transition rather than the old model of, oh my God, you put the baby in my arms to take home, and what do I do next? And I think maybe, Sue, could I ask you to elaborate a little more on family integrated care?
Yes. So in addition to families assuming care, the families receive several other pillars, if you want to call it, of care. One of them is education about their baby, especially when it comes to premature babies. So in the couple of studies that were done on family integrated care in Sweden and in Canada, the parents were required to spend anywhere from 8 to 24 hours a day with their baby and participating in these educational sessions. So education is one of the pillars. Another one of the pillars is peer support. And all of the families are assigned peer mentors to help support and guide them in their care of their baby. So it requires presence of the parents, but support for the parents in terms of education and peer support to ensure that the experience is successful. What the studies have shown is that there's increased breastfeeding rates, there's a shorter length of stay, there's lower rates of chronic lung disease in the baby, so all kinds of good benefits from parents being involved early and continuously in the care of their babies, except when they're in the most critical stages of their illness. Parents are still involved, but there are certain medical things that they're not allowed to do, of course, when the baby's critically ill.
So these, the guidelines for providing psychosocial support in the NICU really is a perfect marriage with family integrated care. Going back to something that that both of you have mentioned earlier in the webinar, that when you have parents who are emotionally able, they're confident, they're more empowered, then they're not going to be so scared to participate. And if you've got that participation starting early, instead of, uh-oh, we're about to be discharged, let me teach you everything about your baby. I mean, the outcomes, obviously the research shows the outcomes for the babies, the outcomes for the families are much more favorable. So let me ask you a final question, again, thinking specifically about the guidelines. What can NICU parent leaders, graduate parents, what can they do to really advocate for these guidelines being implemented in the units that they already work with or perhaps want to be able to work with? And I'll pose that question to both of you. Sue, do you want to start?
Okay. I want to go back and add one more thing to what we were talking about with family integrated care and how it ties into the recommendations. Our goal is to transform NICU staff from the experts who know everything and make all the decisions to mentors and coaches of the parents. And one of the reasons that staff education is so important is that this is a huge paradigm shift within the NICU for nurses and doctors to give up that exalted position of expert and to honor the parents' expertise is really a key part of making family integrated care work. And so, of course, nurses, I'm going to say nurses in particular, are skeptical perhaps about this approach, but the studies have found that nurses actually like the family integrated care model because the parents are helping them do the work for the baby and they feel better about the family's readiness to go home. So now what can parents do about the guidelines? They can look at the guidelines and reflect on their own experience in the NICU to come up with a suggestion of where the care could be improved in their NICU. So, for example, if they weren't allowed to attend rounds or be present in the NICU at shift change, they might pick that specific topic to go to their NICU administration to lobby on behalf of that. And then they could put that request or demand, however you want to look at, within the context of the other recommendations. Or they could just request a meeting with their NICU leadership to say, you know, hey, have you guys seen these recommendations? Have you gone through them yourself to see what you're doing and not doing? And we have on our website, NICUparents.org, we have a worksheet where NICU teams can meet and go over the recommendations and the practices that should be implemented to see where their gaps are, what they're doing well, what they are not doing at all, and what they're sort of doing in between. And then with their NICU team, parents can identify goals for change and improvement. And, you know, it's really difficult to think about implementing, I don't know how many recommendations we had, like 60 or something like that. You know, they certainly can't go in and say, let's do all this in the next 6 months, but together they can prioritize things to change that will help the parent experience.
Mike, do you have anything to add? Any final thoughts?
I would also add that it would be helpful, and many parent leaders have found it helpful, to find one or more people on the staff within their NICU that they could think of as being their parent champions, and to ask questions of the parent champions so that they learn the mechanisms of how things change within the NICU, and maybe ask, you know, if they have a list of 4 or 5 things, and which one is most doable right now, which is something that we can bite off and accomplish and get the ball rolling, so that we can find things getting better for parents, and as things get better for parents, they will get better for everybody who's on the staff in the NICU.
Well, I have to say, I mean, it's always fantastic being able to sit down and to have these conversations with you. And we appreciate so much all the work and time and thoughtfulness that's gone into these recommendations, and what a powerful tool they are when used by parents and other family advocates to bring about changes in our the way that we approach NICU care. We've mentioned several resources throughout this discussion, and we'll be posting some of those for you later, and also including them with the materials associated with these series. But some of the ones we mentioned today are listed here. We also hope that now you are able to see the value of what it is that NPA's Family Advocacy Network does. We are committed. The plan is parents and professionals working together to advance care in the perinatal realm. Both of our authors are wonderful collaborators and always eager to help us out and support us and to answer questions. They both provided their contact information and invite you to learn more about what they're doing. And then if you have more questions, to go ahead and contact them and bring to them what it is that you're thinking about. As we mentioned, we'll be developing a companion website to go along with these series. And in it, you'll be able to go and look at all the different resources we've talked about, to see the 7 different webinars that we're recording, this introduction, and then one on each of the 6 domains that are covered by the recommendations for psychosocial support. We hope that you will enjoy those resources, use them, and come back for more. And after you've done that, please also be sure to familiarize yourself more with the resources that are available through the Preemie Parent Alliance. Again, we thank you so much for joining us and for taking time to listen to these webinars and to find out more about the important work that we're doing. If you ever have any suggestions about topics that we could cover or ways that we could improve the way we share information with you, please feel free to email either myself, Erica, or my colleague, Kira, and we will respond to you and maybe even invite you to help us out. So thank you so much. Have a fantastic day.